Now you might think that being stranded at an unfamiliar airport all the way across the country with a broke airplane might be one of the worst experiences. But in my case, being broke at Cavanaugh Bay was one of the best things to happen to me on the trip. Hello everyone, welcome back to Average Aviator. I'm Travis, and this is the last episode in a series that I'm doing covering an epic cross country that I took from Western Pennsylvania to the Idaho backcountry. In the previous episode, we left off with me starting the engine and taxiing back down the runway at Cavanaugh Bay, about to take off and start working my way back home. But as I started up and taxied down the runway, I smelled something funny and all of my electrical equipment started dying, and I suspected a generator failure. As I shut down, even though I suspected it was a generator failure, I really didn't know for sure until I pulled the cowling panels and saw the black soot on the generator itself. So I started asking people for any ideas of who could help me find a generator and who could install it. Now theoretically, I could have flown without the generator. I could have saved it for flight per the regulations and then just charged up the battery every day, but I didn't think that was the greatest idea because of the distance required. I knew it was going to take multiple days. I didn't know exactly which airports weather would allow me to go to, and just a bunch of other factors of not having the generator, not having that electrical system reliability really turned me off to that idea. So I decided to sit and wait and try to get the generator replaced as close to Cavanaugh Bay as I could. Through some of the people helping me there at Cavanaugh Bay, I got in contact with a guy named Zane Brown of Vulcan Aero in Sandpoint, Idaho. And I cannot stress enough, Zane helped me out so much throughout this entire ordeal. A lot of it comes later in the story, so I'll leave that for then. But suffice to say that he was super quick to respond. He offered to come all the way out to Cavanaugh Bay to replace the generator on site, but we discussed it and we figured that it would be a lot easier for both of us if I just flew it Cavanaugh Bay to Sandpoint, which was about a 15-minute flight, and that way, you know, it wouldn't inconvenience him and he wouldn't have to bring all his stuff out to Cavanaugh Bay. So that's what we decided to do. He ordered me a generator, and it was supposed to be there the next day, but he had a project that he was committed to the next day, and then the day after that he wasn't working. And so it was going to be 3 days until I could fly my plane over to Sandpoint to get it worked on with Zane. And so I was pretty much committed to be stuck at Cavanaugh Bay for about 3 days. Now we have fly-ins on the East Coast, but they're typically scheduled. You know, it'll be a different airport every weekend, and they're really cool to go to. But it's funny because in Idaho, it seems like at places like Cavanaugh Bay and Johnson Creek, it doesn't really matter if it's scheduled. Every weekend is a fly-in, and I met some amazing people the weekend I was stuck at Cavanaugh Bay. So it's interesting because in life in general, you never know who you're gonna meet, and so you should always treat everybody with dignity and respect. But especially in aviation, the community is a lot smaller, and so you really never know who you're going to meet. A perfect example of this is I parked next to a guy that flew an unassuming Cessna 150 and he was a really nice guy, but somebody else had come over and me and the other guy had been talking about an infamous accident that happened. It's pretty well known because there's a video on it, but it was a mid-air collision at Johnson Creek. And we just started discussing it, and this other guy, his name was Dan, he was just sitting kind of the side listening, and we paused. We asked him, oh, what do you think? Do you have any thoughts on that? And it was very surprising when he said, actually, you know what? I have some really good insight on that accident because I was a passenger in the plane that got hit. Dan started going into all the details of the accident, but it was really fascinating to talk to him specifically in the Idaho backcountry because he had some good insight onto exactly what me and that other pilot were doing, which was, you know, kind of talking about the accident but not really knowing what we were talking about and putting a little conjecture in there. Me and Dan are still connected. We still talk every once in a while, and it was funny because he happened to be in Yuma, Arizona at the same time that I was, and I invited him out to see my work airplane. So that was pretty cool. That's a long-standing relationship that I think will continue on for a bit. Another one of the awesome people that I met when I was there and that I hung out with a lot was Sid and his wife, the couple that were in the beautiful Cessna 185, and they were with a caravan of a bunch of different people, and one of the airplanes was a Carbon Cub, and it turned out to be Jackie and Tobias from Cub Trekking. Some of you might recognize that because they are a little bit more well known in the aviation community, but I had never heard of them, and I didn't know what Cub Trekking was at all. Well, I just hung out with them all weekend. It was funny because the one afternoon, Jackie made spaghetti for everybody, and I helped clean up the dishes that night. It's just crazy the kind of people that you meet. And meeting them was also something that kind of stuck with me because I feel like I have a little bit of a connection with them. They probably don't remember me very much. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe if Jackie and Tobias, you are watching this for some reason, maybe you recognize me, maybe you don't. But it always stuck with me because I remember we actually traveled around a little bit with Sid and his wife, and then me and Jackie and Tobias. And I remember Jackie talking about something hurting in her like mouth. It was on her tongue. And she was worried that, you know, they had done some tests or something and was trying to figure out if it was cancer or not. And so I remember that conversation very clearly. And at that time, it was unclear as to whether she had cancer. And, you know, it's like, wow, that's crazy. I really hope that works out for you. But I never really talked to them after that. And then now, following them on social media, I've seen the whole transition from that first conversation of like, hey, well, I wonder what this is, to it was cancer, to now she's pretty much fully recovered and she's cancer free for a bit. So it's been really cool to watch their whole transition through that, their whole battle with that. And I felt like this personal connection because I was there for that conversation. And I just wanted to say, Jackie and Tobias, you guys are doing awesome things for the aviation community. Keep it up. And I love everything that you guys do. There was so many other people that I had met at my time in Cavanaugh Bay, and I can't mention all of them. And it's so difficult because maybe this makes a boring video to talk about some of the people I met, especially when I don't have really any footage about these people. I didn't shove a camera in the face. That would be probably not the greatest thing to do. So it's really difficult to convey exactly how much these experiences and these interactions with people meant to me. But this is why I got into aviation. This is why I keep coming back to it. And why I'm so dedicated to it is because all of the awesome people that you meet and all of the amazing experiences that aviation brings about. So after all of those amazing experiences with all those amazing people, and I'm using the word amazing a lot, but whatever, Sunday rolled around and it was time to get my airplane fixed. So I gotta say, Zane with Vulcan Aero at Sandpoint, he is awesome. Man, he is one of the coolest mechanics I've ever had to deal with. He's such an awesome guy and he helped me out so much. When I showed up, he was actually working on another airplane at the time, and he was kind of really busy with that one. A&P mechanics, I think all of them are pretty much swamped nowadays because they're dwindling, and Zane is no exception. So it's really helpful that I actually know a little bit about working on the Mooney and able to work on it and have no problem with doing a lot of the things myself and get my hands dirty, because it saved me and Zane a lot of headache and time, and me money, I think, because as I was doing some of the stuff like taking the cowling off, which takes a lot of time but doesn't take a lot of expertise, Zane was able to get that other plane, finish that up, get it out the door, while I was busy doing all the stuff on the Mooney. And if I had just said, oh, okay, no, you take care of it, I'm gonna go off and just wait for you to do everything. If Zane just didn't say, no, I'm not doing that, you can find somebody else, I don't know if it would have taken, 3 more days with a broke airplane because of how busy he was. So thankfully I was able to do a lot of the simple things with Zane working on the other airplane. But when it came to actually replacing the generator, obviously Zane, being the A&P, was the one that was doing that. But we really knocked it out a lot quicker than I expected. But the one thing that kind of threw a wrench in our plans, so to speak, is we looked at the generator belt, and it was really old and cracked. We could have kept it. It would have probably lasted the flight back home, even though it might have been okay. We figured while we're there, we might as well just replace the belt itself. And the problem with replacing the belt is that it seems simple, but in order to replace the belt, you have to take the prop off, and that is a chore. In order to take the prop off, you have to loosen the 6 bolts incrementally, and you only have a little bit of room to get the actual prop bolts off, so it takes a long time to loosen the bolts. Before you loosen the bolts, you have to pop out these little roll pins, and that's really what shut us down for the day, which ended up working out, but it kind of threw another wrench in our plans. Is as we were trying to get those roll pins back in, one of them bent and broke. And so they're kind of crucial, those roll pins are kind of crucial to keeping those nuts from not turning or loosening in flight. And so he didn't have any of those roll pins on hand. We had to go find some, which meant that the airplane was going to be delayed for a whole day. We got pretty much everything done that day except for the roll pin, and he knew where to find one, but everything had closed for the evening. I still had to put the cowling all back on and all this other stuff. So I made a deal with Zane, and I said, hey man, if I could just sleep in your hangar so I didn't have to pay for a hotel, that'd be amazing. And while I'm here, I could just put the cowling on, and by the time you get in the morning with that roll pin, everything will be done besides putting that that roll pin in, and then we can put the rest of the cowling on and I can be on my way. And he was completely fine with me sleeping in the hangar, which was awesome. It was kind of like camping, but in an actual building. It was really cool. You know, I just camped out in the hangar and put the cowling back on that night by myself. It was awesome that he trusted me to be there with his tools. I guess I really wasn't going anywhere. My airplane was broke. We settled up in the morning, and I cannot thank Zane enough. The work that he did was absolutely amazing, and I don't think he charged me nearly as much enough for the work that he did and how much he saved my butt. So thank you, Zane, a ton. If you guys want, or in the Idaho or Sandpoint area, even Washington or Montana, check out Zane at Vulcan Aero. He is awesome. So the next day, by the time we got the prop bolts back on and the engine cowl back up and an engine run done to make sure that the generator was actually working properly, by that time it was about 1 o'clock before I finally was able to start working my way back home once again. But there was one more place that I wanted to hit up before I actually got home, and that was Glacier National Park. That was one of the places that I really wanted to see on this trip. And so I took off from Sandpoint, and then I actually turned north a little bit and headed for Logan Pass over Glacier National Park. And I am really glad I did. It added a little bit actually to my trip, but it was so worth it. So I couldn't have asked for any better weather flying all the way across Montana. I was just up at 11,500 feet and I was cruising along, but I ended up going all the way to Watford City, North Dakota for my first fuel stop, and it took me just under 4 hours to get there. Watford was actually a really cool airport. You know, it seems to be out in the middle of nowhere in North Dakota, you know, unassuming, but the terminal was really nice and modern. The crew car, you could just sign out. I borrowed the crew car to go get some food down the road. And the food was really good too. I mean, there's really nothing to complain. It was a really nice airport, but I wanted to get a little bit closer to home and work my way. So I fueled up the airplane and took off right before sunset. The weather was beautiful. It was super clear, which is really nice. I probably wouldn't have left at night over unfamiliar territory with weather. So the weather was clear, and so I decided to keep going. And I flew again for about 3.5 hours, and it was pretty much all at night over North Dakota and into Minnesota. I worked my way all the way past Minneapolis to the other side, and it was probably about midnight at this point. I was really tired, and so I decided I needed to land, and so I found an airport called Chetek. I honestly don't know how it's pronounced. Clicked on the lights, landed there. It was nice. I fueled up that night and after cruising at 11,500 feet, I was doing about 150, 160 knots ground speed the entire time. I calculated out that I was burning just over 7 gallons an hour. So that's one of the beautiful things of the Mooney. The fueling up after 3.5, 4 hours of flying was not that bad. So at Chetek, after fueling the airplane, I parked the airplane off to the side, and there was a little FBO lounge type thing that was open. So I went in there and there was a couch. So I decided to just crash on the couch. So I didn't sleep the greatest. I probably went to bed at 1 and then woke up at 5-ish, 6 maybe. In the morning, the weather was absolutely beautiful. There was just the slightest bit of fog that had remained, and the wind was completely calm. And I took off from Chetek pretty early in the morning. I wasn't exactly sure if I was going to be able to make it all the way back to my home airport of McVille from Minneapolis, essentially. So I figured I might have to stop for fuel eventually, but I picked a route over Lake Michigan. And part of this was because I kind of just wanted to see Lake Michigan. I thought it would be pretty cool to fly through Michigan. I'd never really been there before. Also, I figured that I always would have been within gliding distance of land, given the glide ratio of the Mooney and being at 11,500 feet. But when I got over Lake Michigan, I guess it took me off guard as to exactly how wide it was. And then with the wind, I think there was a portion where if the engine had quit, I don't know if I would have been able to make it back to land. So that really kind of tuned me up, because before, previously, never doing it, I had seen people talking about, or had listened to people talking about, should we fly over Lake Michigan on our way to Oshkosh? And I'm like, well, why not? That's, whatever. It's a lake, But then once I got over it, I realized, that wouldn't be great if my engine failed right now. This is a pretty big lake that I didn't realize exactly how big it was until I got there. Doing it again, I don't know if I would have flown over Lake Michigan, especially given all the problems that I had previously with the Mooney, but thankfully nothing happened, and it was smooth sailing. I had cut across at, thankfully, the narrowest portion of the lake. And then once I got around, the Lake Erie kind of Toledo area, I realized with the fuel that I burned and how fast I was going, I had enough to make it all the way back to McVille. And so I had to dodge a little bit of clouds on my way back, but I made it back to McVille. It took me about 4.3 hours, I believe, but I made it all the way back from Minneapolis all the way to Pittsburgh in the Mooney without having to refuel. It wasn't until I landed back in McVille, parked the airplane, and started unpacking it that I finally realized exactly how tired I was. I mean, it wasn't just the fact that I had flown 12 out of the previous 24 hours with only 4 hours of sleep, but also the fact that over the 2 weeks of the trip, I flew over 3,800 nautical miles and spent about 31 hours in the air, which, I mean, it really is exhausting. And the fact that I was just camping out of the back of the airplane pretty much for 2 weeks, and all the hikes that I did, and and staying up late and getting up early, it really wore me down. So when I finally got home, I was just absolutely exhausted. But I must say, it was well worth it. Even with all of the challenges I faced, the fuel leak, the magnetos, the pulling the prop to replace the generator and the generator belt, all the unforeseen issues were completely worth it. I got asked a lot, if the plane wasn't up for the task, why did you take it so far away? Why didn't you know? You should have known that your plane was in shambles or was gonna break. And there might be some truth to that, but honestly, I mean, I feel like if I spent all the money on replacing all of the things that needed replaced that I did on the road, I wouldn't have ever taken the trip. And a lot of the times when I was broke, I met some amazing people, and it still turned out to be an awesome experience. So I don't think I'd trade any of it. If I knew what was gonna happen beforehand, I probably would still do it all over again. It was just that amazing. Hopefully this inspires you to take your own trip. Maybe it's not all the way out to Idaho or anything, but hopefully this can inspire you to take your airplane, or maybe even get an airplane so you can do stuff like this, because it is well worth it. Thank you again to everybody that helped me out so much on this trip. Like I said, I can't thank some of these people enough, and I really hope to see you again sometime in the future. But until then, I guess all I have to say is, see ya.